And that was found on page 12, where she fled and raced out of the hotel. An example of Salvador coming with her and running home is that he didn't argue at all. That was on page 13. Go ahead and add this as an example. The last example, if you need to pause to write this one down, go ahead and do that. And then when you're ready, we can move on to this last example. An example of Salvador worrying that it's about him and Dorotea is when he talks about how Captain Ortega, didn't want Salvador to date Dorotea, and that's also on page 13. Go ahead and make sure you have all of the effects and examples or justifications of those effects written down. When you're ready, you can go ahead and move on to the next page. It says, now let's create a cause and effect map for a second significant event in the novel. So if you go back to our circle maps, we circled another significant event is Mr. Torres dies, and that's on page 16. So let's go ahead and look in our books on page 16 to find a quote that will best indicate the event. So right here we can see when the widow is explaining how he was on the boat, and then it says the water took him with it when it passed over the boat. All right, we're going to copy down that quote as our example of a significant event. So let's draw our cause and effect map. We're just going to do the effects because, again, an event is significant when it has an effect on something. So we want to show the effects that the father passing away has. So we're going to say the water, make sure you quote it, the water took him with it when it passed over the boat. When it passed over the boat. Okay, and make sure you put an end quote, and that is found on page 16. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some effect boxes. I'm only going to do 2 with you this time, and then you need to add 1 to 2 more boxes. Okay, so I should see at least 4 effects of the father passing away. Okay, so what is something that happened? Remember, the effect is the what happened. What is something that happened because Mr. Torres died? One thing is something that we already talked about, right? And that is, I'm going to label this the event first. That is that Mrs. Torres, Lupita's mother, had to leave work, right? She had to leave work early. And that happened in chapter 1. Let's move to chapter 2, what we read today. What are some things that were an effect of of Mr. Torres dying today? Well, in the beginning, we see that the neighbor women are still trying to help out. They cook supper and bring it to the Torres house. Let me show you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the book. They have to go get Uncle Antonio, right, who is their uncle, to come. They're very sad. Remember, if something is significant, if it causes an emotion, right? They kind of argue about who should go ask Captain Ortega for the money that he is owed to their dad. Salvador doesn't really want to go because it's because of his, bad relationship about dating Dorotea. Lupita tries to go along because she's very responsible, right? So they're trying to, right now, they're going through the process of getting the family together and trying to get any money they can. So let's go ahead and pick one of those as one of the effects that I'm going to write. And I'm going to say Uncle Antonio comes over. They also have to fetch the priest, it says. Okay. And then you want to justify these effects with quotes, right? Or something from the book. So Miss Torres had to leave work early. We saw that back in chapter 1. And actually in chapter 2, we find out that she has to take a couple of days off. So that is also part of that effect, right? So that was back on page 12, right? Actually, page 11 and 12. Okay, so I'm going to put where she says Senor Aguilera sent her home. Let's go ahead and put that. Senor Aguilar, sent her home. And that is on page. Okay. The second effect is Uncle Antonio comes over. Someone that doesn't usually come over. And that is on page number 20. We can find an example on page 20. It says, Uncle Antonio, who had arrived earlier, stayed to speak to Mama. In a few minutes, a young priest to whom Salvador had dispatched came in. So we see that Uncle Antonio arrives early in the morning. Arrives early. And that is on page 20. Okay. Go ahead and come up with 2 more effects of Mr. Torres being taken into the water. Okay, think about some of the things that we read today in chapter 2. What are some things that happened? Or go back to chapter 1 and look for some things that happened. Okay, so I need 2 effects, and then also you should come up with an example of that effect and quote the page number. Okay, go ahead and do that at this time. That is actually your independent practice. So if you look up here, it tells you to add an event to each map. So you can add 1 event to each map, or you can add 2 to the second map. Go ahead and hit pause and do that at this time. Okay, once you have added your own effects of the events that are significant, you're going to do your exit slip, which is answering the following multiple choice questions. These multiple choice questions are about significance measures, but they're also on chapter 2, part 1 that we read today. So when you're ready, go ahead and hit pause, and you can answer the following questions on your exit slip, and then go ahead and turn your lesson plan in.